And we are back with another episode of the Kyle Anslone Show. I am rolling solo again today, but I have a ton of news I want to talk about. And actually, I had some breaking news that I want to touch on before I get into what I actually have planned for the show, because this seems like it's a huge development in an extremely important story. FBI arrests Brian Cole Jr. as suspect in January 6, 2021 pipe bomb case. Now, I haven't been able to get a whole lot of details on this. The FBI says that they have receipts that show he purchased the items that were used in the bomb, the January 6th pipe bombing, the two bombs that were planted by the DNC and the RNC that, of course, didn't explode and the Capitol Police later found. But they have arrested this man. It seems like they're saying that he is the person behind this. They say he has no violent criminal history or anything like that. He lived with his family, including his mother. Didn't specify if, he is a 30-year-old man. So it's possible that he has a house and his elderly mother lives with him. Also possible that he's a man child and he lives with his mother for that reason. So a lot of questions. I'm really interested to see what Ken Silva has to write, former guest of the show. We are actually talking about this on the show just last week about the January 6th pipe bombing and the allegations made by the Blaze. And so this would certainly suggest that the conspiracy that the Blaze alleged, where there was a Capitol 6 police officer who actually planted the pipe bombs, would not appear to be true. I guess it's possible they're working together, and we'll get those details later, but that they've arrested this person seemingly who made the bombs and would then have planted them would suggest that reporting would be incorrect. So we'll see how that develops. And again, I'll be keeping a close eye on what Ken over at Headline News USA has to say about all this. Now, into today's show, want to break down some recent remarks from Benjamin Netanyahu. The man's an absolute nutcase. Hillary blames TikTok for everything bad in the world, and Rachel Maddow still believes Russiagate. You can't make this up. Some nice juicy content for us to break down at the end of a long week of some very depressing news. So let's start off here with Netanyahu's latest remarks about the situation in Gaza. He made this during a New York Times hosted event.
Will change the face of the Middle East. We will win this war, because it was clear to me that we were not only fighting Hamas, we were fighting Hezbollah, we were fighting the Assad regime, we were fighting the militias in Iraq, we were fighting the Houthis, we were fighting Iran, and we did. We won this war. We won this war, but it's never ending. It's like, if you have cancer and you take it out, it can still come back. It's certain types of cancer.
All right, pause it there. So this is absolutely unbelievable, because the man is trying to declare victory, but at the same time also trying to make it clear that he still needs significant American support and he needs Israel to remain at a state of war. So it can never be a full victory. Israel can never actually win, but they also have to be winning because, of course, Donald Trump doesn't like losers. And so this statement was really important, I think, him talking about Israel being in a never-ending war. I do think this kind of represents several things. One, Netanyahu is using this never-ending war. Every time it seems like there's a new ceasefire, Israel's breaking it. Every time the conflict cools off, Israel finds some other way to escalate it. So they're bombing Gaza less, but they're carrying out more raids and military operations in the West Bank. They're pummeling Lebanon and destroying the ceasefire in that case. So that is, just he doesn't want peace, and here he is just explicitly saying this. I also think it represents the fact that Israel wants to continue to expand its borders, that if Israel is at a state of peace, a deal could be reached with the Palestinians. There would then be an Israeli state next to the Palestinian state, and Israel would have borders and have to act as a normal country. Netanyahu does not want that. He wants to be able to take parts of Syria, southern Lebanon, access the West Bank and Gaza, expel the Palestinians Palestinians and the native people who live on that land and replace them with a greater Israel. And who knows how far he actually wants to go. They talk about annexing the West Bank, but there's a lot of people in Israel who had their eye on the East Bank, on the Syria area leading up to Damascus, southern Lebanon, south of the Litani River, the Sinai Peninsula of Egypt, and some people who would like to draw the map all the way essentially to the Persian Gulf. So there is a real possibility here that the reason Netanyahu wants to leave Israel in a perpetual state of war is to give Israel a perpetual excuse to keep expanding its borders. Just today, there's a really detailed report in Haaretz about how Israel is expanding the separation wall, cutting it through the Jordan Valley this time, and it's going to separate a lot of Palestinian communities. It's going to separate farmers for their land. And again, this is all part of Israel expanding its borders. Every time a new mile of the separation wall in the West Bank or East Jerusalem goes off, it's essentially another portion of the West Bank that's being permanently taken over by Israel. And they're making life in the Palestinian communities hell by doing it. There's over, I think with this new expansion, there will be over 450 miles in look, the West Bank isn't very big. We're not talking about Texas here, but 450 miles of walls now cutting off Palestinian communities from each other in the West Bank, and really creating situations where the Israeli settlements that are behind those separation walls become de facto Israeli territory. This is what they talk about when they say the slow annexation of the West Bank is underway. And of course, I can't resume the video without mentioning, as one of the commenters says, that Netanyahu sees human beings as cancer. This is, really disgusting rhetoric that he has here. And it does go to show the genocidal nature of the current Israeli state, where, as the former defense minister said, that the people of Gaza are human animals. Netanyahu compared them to Amalek, and now we're hearing a cancer. And look, this isn't new, right? Israel used to call it mowing the lawn, that every few years we would have to go and conduct a major bombing campaign in Gaza because, there would be some people that wouldn't be happy with their situation, would they be prepared to take up arms. And so by conducting these frequent, shorter military campaigns, he saw it as a way of, cutting away at the weeds and things like that. The same thing that they're saying here. So let's roll on, because Netanyahu isn't done.
If you don't take it out, you die. So we took it out. We removed this threat of nuclear annihilation that could have happened within a year. Iran, within a year, within 6 months, could have had its first atomic bomb. And they would have no compunction about throwing it.
And where do you think Iran is right now on that? I mean, there has been.
I think we pushed them back a lot, Andrew.
How far?
Well, I think it's very hard to manufacture a bomb when your top scientists are knocked out. They had atomic scientists, and we knocked them out in the first 2 minutes of the war, along with their top command.
All right, pause it there again. So here again, we see Netanyahu in kind of the same bind, right? Where he needs to be able to fearmonger against Iran. That's an important part of keeping the U.S. so heavily engaged and militarized in the Middle East, sending Israel so many weapons. The Hamas rockets were always small. In October 7th side, Hamas didn't present, and nobody could argue that Hamas or even Hezbollah presented a real existential military threat to Israel. Israel has essentially an American military that, they bought, or that American taxpayers have paid for them. And so they're able to conduct significant operations. And these, groups have rockets and missiles, and sure, they could kill some Israelis, but, Netanyahu is making it out to be an existential threat. Like, if you don't take out this cancer, if you don't kill these groups, you die. Israel will die if they don't aren't constantly killing Palestinians and Lebanese and Syrians and Iranians. So, Netanyahu needs the threat to be out there, but at the same time, he has to portray the June war as a success, the so-called 12-day war as a success, where they had to have crippled Iran's nuclear program in order to justify Donald Trump getting involved. That was the point in dragging the Americans in. If that war was successful, then they must have destroyed Iran's nuclear program. And so Netanyahu is, again, trying to have it both ways. Now, the important thing that the journalist doesn't ask him about, what he should ask him about, is, wait, at the time, everybody was saying you said Iran was 2 weeks away from the bomb. And so now you've lost that bat to 6 to 12 months. So that seems like a pretty big discrepancy, because they were telling the American people Iran could have a nuclear weapon in 2 weeks, which obviously from his own statements now Israel didn't really believe at the time. It seems only the US intelligence community fed that to Donald Trump to get the US to get involved in this war for Israel. But the bigger point here is Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapons program, Israel does. And that should be the question that Benjamin Netanyahu has asked, because, of course, Israel's illegal, unsupervised nuclear weapons program would make it impossible for the U.S. to keep giving Israel military aid. Under U.S. law, that would be illegal. Now, one more point in this kind of last section that I want to say here is that he touts taking out Iran's nuclear scientists. These are civilians, right? If another country killed a bunch of Israeli scientists that maybe they were or weren't involved in some portion of Israel's nuclear weapons program, Israel, the United States, and everybody else would be outraged. They would see these as assassinations of civilians. And so for Netanyahu, again, a country that only had a civilian nuclear program, to brag about killing their nuclear scientists, this is just clear extrajudicial killing. This is murder. They intentionally murdered Iranians who were not a threat to Israel in any way, to be able to claim they set back their nuclear program. It's all rather disgusting. I think we have a little bit more Netanyahu here.
Back. Does that mean that they won't try again? Of course they'll try again. But our focus right now is on the Iran axis, right, on their various proxies. On Hamas, let's finish the job there and open up a path for a different future for Gaza and for Israel. And the same thing is true of Hezbollah. I mean, we opened up the possibility of a change in Lebanon. I think it's also up to the people of Lebanon to seize the future of their own country. But we've brought down Hezbollah a lot, and we deal with the Houthis and any other proxy that we have to deal with. I think opportunities are vast. They're vast, but I think it requires more work.
So, he's just talking about how they've completely upended the Middle East over the past 2 years, that they saw the completion of the regime change in Syria, that Israel has taken out a lot of the leadership of Hezbollah, which is a militant organization. It represented probably the most powerful fighting force in Lebanon at a time, but also represented the Shia of southern Lebanon. And so that's really important that he just took out their leadership. And then he tries to say that we still have to deal with the Houthis. Of course, Ansar Allah, the ruling faction in Yemen, has imposed a blockade on Israeli shipping through the Red Sea that massive US and Israeli bombing campaigns were not able to break. And on top of that, Ansar Allah expanded to missile and drone strikes directly inside Israeli territory. So I just want to kind of end here by saying the rosy picture that Netanyahu is painting of a Middle East that's in the middle of a transformation for the betterment of Israel may not quite be the case. And I do think there at the end, he's signaling a little bit that they plan to continue the rampage in Gaza. Now, Netanyahu was speaking there about the Iranian nuclear program, and this was recently asked of a Pentagon press secretary. So I want to roll this next clip for you guys.
Thank you. And my second question regarding Iran, there are reports that Iran's been planning on rebuilding its nuclear facilities. Iranian's president has said that it plans to rebuild its nuclear facilities with, quote, greater strength. Can you provide us on any sort of update on where that currently stands?
I can tell you that Operation Midnight Hammer was an absolute resounding success. Iran's nuclear capabilities were totally obliterated, and experts estimated that, it would take 2 years for them to recover. So thanks to President Trump's bold and swift action, we were able to dismantle that threat to the American people. And I think it was also a historic operation by virtue of the fact that there was a clear end state. We have seen this department get marred down in the Middle East in endless wars and nation building. That has stopped under this president and this secretary. We now have a clear end state, a clear mission set, and Operation Midnight Hammer was a success in dismantling that.
So I find this clip so interesting, right? Because one of the things she's focusing on is that we resolved the issue. But the actual question was, Iran says they're rebuilding their nuclear program. So what's the status of that? And if Iran rebuilds their nuclear program, then they haven't really resolved this issue. Now, it's quite amazing because there's no actual issue to even be resolved in the first place because Iran isn't building a nuclear weapon. Can't stress that enough. But if their kind of fantasy of Iran was true, that if Iran has a nuclear program, they're going to build a nuclear weapon and then they're going to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. If that narrative was true, then they haven't resolved the issue because Iran is saying we're going to rebuild our nuclear program and that it's going to be stronger and more capable than before, and likely it will be. And so, this isn't the success that they portray it as. Now, one other reason I want to play this clip and include the person who asked the question is this is Monica Page, and she's one of the Turning Point USA reporters. And so here you have somebody from Charlie Kirk's organization asking a softball question to the Pentagon press secretary about a policy that Charlie Kirk actually opposed. It's I guess maybe an interesting insight into the direction of that organization. All right, next up here, guys, I'm gonna make you suffer a little bit. This is Hillary Clinton talking about TikTok.
Students, smart, well-educated young people from our own country, from around the world, where were they getting their information? They were getting their information from social media, particularly TikTok. That is where they were learning about what happened on October 7th, what happened in the days, weeks, and months to follow. That's a serious problem. It's a serious problem for democracy, whether it's Israel or the United States, and it's a serious problem for our young people.
All right, pause there. So this is incredible, right? She essentially just yada, yada, yada over the genocide. She said what happened in the days and weeks and months to follow. You mean the murder of 100,000 plus Palestinians, including tens of thousands of children? All these children who people saw with their legs amputated, with doctors saying they were undergoing the amputations without anesthesia, all the pictures of the starving children, that's what you're skipping over, right? This is information, it's facts, it's video of what is happening in Gaza. And she's saying when people saw that, it's a threat to democracy. And of course, whenever it's really important to understand, whenever Hillary Clinton in particular talks about democracy, that means that the election went the way Hillary Clinton wanted. Right? She praised democracy in Yemen after Mansour Hadi won an election there in 2014. But guess what? Hillary Clinton set it up so he was the only candidate on the ballot. She criticized the elections in Gaza in, I believe, 2006 after Hamas won a plurality because, in her view, they shouldn't have held the elections if they didn't know who the winner was going to be. She personally worked to overturn our own election here in the United States of America after she lost to Donald Trump, right? This woman hates democracy and what it actually means. She likes things to go the way that Hillary Clinton thinks that they should go. And so that's what she's saying here. She's mad because people are able to get information aside from the corporate media that amplifies her own position. And so then they form different viewpoints. And now this old lady is mad that kids are using apps on their phone to share information, and they're not just reading the New York Times and the Washington Post and watching MSNBC all day, where the narrative is what Hillary Clinton wants it to be. Right? That's why this woman is mad right now. And also that this would somehow be bad for the state of Israel and that we should care. Right? Like, why is it a bad thing if the American people are exposed to what Israel is doing in Gaza and they don't want to fund it anymore? If there's a genocide ongoing, if something horrific happens, well, guess what, Hillary? Then people are going to react to that when they get that information, and they should. It can't simply be that you get to control the print media and say that, oh, a bunch of Palestinians died today, but the IDF says Hamas was hiding in the building. So, oh, those poor children, it's the Hamas using them as human shields. It's, the actual information, the actual content, the video that exposes all of her lies. And that's why she hates it so much. So let's keep listening to Hillary
It was
rant.
frankly shocking to me how little the students we were encountering, not only in this class we teach, which is a very large class, international relations, about crisis decision making, but students more generally. And that's why I mentioned the social media piece of it, because when you would try to talk to them to engage in some kind of reasonable discussion, it was very difficult because they did not know history, they had very little context, and what they were being told on social media was not just one-sided, it was pure propaganda.
All right, pause again. So here you have Hillary calling all of her students ignorant, right? Like they don't understand the history and the context. And what she's going to do is she's going to go and talk about events that happened before they were even born, right? Her students now, things that happened during like her husband's presidency is ancient history. It happened before they were born, right? And she's mad that they don't understand all the context that she once in the narrative because they're looking at their phones and they see a genocide unfolding. That they shouldn't react to the genocide, that they should know that, oh boy, those Palestinians just never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. They had Oslo and Camp David and all these chances to get a state, but they just demanded too much because they hate the Jews too much. And because of that, they foiled their own state. And now we're in the situation that they were in. And it's not the fault of the Israelis. They tried to make a good deal with the Palestinians, and the Palestinians rejected that. And then they stewed in their anger at the situation they caused until October 6th happened. And then the Israelis just did what they had to do because the Palestinians just won't take a deal, right? And of course, nobody cares because there's a genocide unfolding. Even if all that was true, people wouldn't care because they're going to react to the genocide. They're going to react to the mass starvation of the Palestinian children. And so Hillary, again, is just mad that she can no longer control the narrative by pointing out all this, fabricated history and narratives that they have rolled out in the past that worked. All right, let's keep rolling, Chris.
When you think about how to tell Israel's story, and it's important, it's not just looking internally, it's looking externally, and particularly looking at young people, because, it's not just the usual suspects. It is a lot of young Jewish Americans who don't know the history and don't understand. I was talking to Condi Rice, and, she said in an interview that I did after the 20-point plan came out, she and I were on CBS, and she said, when people were chanting from the river to the sea, she would ask the students what river, what sea they didn't know. I had the same experience. A lot of the challenge is with younger people. More than 50% of young people in America get their news from social media. So just pause on that for a second.
I think we could probably be done with that clip there, Chris. Just, to kind of put a bow on all of this, that she would go, well, I called Condi Rice and we talked about how these kids just don't know. You mean the same Condoleezza Rice that helped to lie us into the Iraq war? Like, that lady is infamous. We do not like her. And the idea that, she is still like in these elite circles, that she was able to lose the 2016 election and have so little ability to self-reflect that she still thinks she needs to be calling Condoleezza Rice to have a conversation about, American politics and society and why things are the way they are. Of course, Condoleezza Rice doesn't know and understand for the same reasons that you don't. And so by you two talking to each other, just confirming each other's biases, and I'm sure these are like two people that who was it, Barry Weiss called for to have discussion. Oh, you got Hillary Clinton, a Democrat, and Condoleezza Rice, a Republican. They're from the same establishment. They're from the same war state. So, of course, they agree with each other on these issues. And again, she's just trying to make fun of the young people for being stupid and not understanding, including the Jewish, young Jewish Americans, when really this is all just about her losing control of the narrative and being mad and throwing a fit over it. All right, so last up here today, I have this clip I found of Rachel Maddow, and I'm not even lying to you guys. This lady still believes in Russiagate. So she was on with Stephen Colbert and said some absolutely wild stuff that I really wanted to break down and talk about. Let's roll it.
They wrote the plan for what they want Ukraine to do, and the White House put it on its letterhead and said, here it is. You better do it. And, you know, Russia is a podunk country. They're a huge landmass, largest physical country in the world. They've got an economy like the size of Italy, right?
So
They've
pause
got
it there.
A kleptocratic.
This lady understands so little about she says that Russia wrote the 28-point peace plan. If anybody had listened to any comments from any Russian official, whether it's Vladimir Putin, his spokesman Peskov, Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, on down the line, you would know that Trump's 28-point peace plan did not reflect Russia's demands to end the war, and Russia is looking for some pretty significant alterations to that peace plan before they would agree to it. So no, this wasn't written by Russia, slapped on a Trump. The fact that she's a news lady who would frame it that way to an audience is absolutely baffling, right? Like, this is supposed to be somebody who's like talking the truth. I know she's on the Tonight Show, so she wants to be a little bit funny, fine, but obviously Russia didn't write that peace plan, and that she would frame it that way is absurd. And then this is, you know, John McCain-esque, right? The idea that Russia is nothing more than a giant gas station with nuclear weapons. And she doesn't even acknowledge they have nuclear weapons. She just calls them a podunk country, right? Well, Russia has actually made some pretty significant territorial gains in Ukraine over the past few years, fighting against essentially a NATO army. So that doesn't seem like a podunk country. It seems like a very capable military force, which, by the way, is backed with the world's largest nuclear arsenal. So no, Russia is a world superpower. They hold nuclear weapons. It's true. They don't have the biggest economy. A part of that is the U.S. absolutely destroyed Russia during the 90s, which, you know, if Rachel Maddow knew anything about Russia, she would understand it was the, you know, in part, the U.S. bankrupting of Russia, the U.S. Exploiting the Russian economy post-fall of the Soviet Union, that created such deplorable conditions that they welcomed in a strawman nationalist like Vladimir Putin. It's why Russia has stood up and drawn red lines when it comes to NATO expansions, in part because of how poorly the Americans treated and have treated the Russians post-end of the Soviet Union. And so it's absolutely disgusting that it's people like Rachel Maddow and Hillary Clinton and Condoleezza Rice that still have so much control over the foreign policy discussion in Washington and D.C. Fortunately, you know, Hillary Clinton and Condoleezza Rice and Rachel Maddow and Stephen Colbert, for that matter, are all less and less important to the average American. And they go other places to find the truth because they know that this lady is just lying to them. And let's go ahead and play this next slide from Rachel Maddow.
Kleptocratic, sclerotic government run by a guy who's never going to leave until he dies. The idea that we work for him, that we work for them, is so humiliating and is such an abject failure on the part of Trump in terms of his weakness. I don't know what Putin has on him, but he works for Putin, and it's an embarrassment to this country.
So I can't get over how much this whole clip looks like Stephen Colbert interviewing a slightly younger version of himself. But, you know, at the end here, the idea that she still believes, after she falsely talked about all the Russiagate lies, right? The P tape, that Putin had kompromat on Donald Trump, that Putin rigged the election for Donald Trump. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of lies she fed to the American people, promoting the narrative that Donald Trump was a puppet of Vladimir Putin. And after all that has been debunked, all that has been disproven, she is just going to go on with Stephen Colbert, say it as flat fat, and then they're going to turn the applause line on, and like little trained seals, all the audience is going to clap and go, woo, yay, Donald Trump's controlled by Vladimir Putin. Do these people look at what's happening in the world today? Do they know what's going on in Ukraine? That, yeah, the US isn't just giving them the weapons for free, but we're still sending the Ukrainians weapons. We're giving them the drones, the technology, and the intelligence to bypass Russian air defenses to strike Russian refineries all over their country. This is not something that Donald Trump would be doing if he was controlled by Vladimir Putin. If he was controlled by Vladimir Putin, this war would be over already. And it's not. So clearly, she's just lying. She hasn't had an original thought in her head since 2015, and for the past decade has been reproducing the same absolute garbage about Donald Trump being controlled by Putin, and that shapes her worldview. It's absolutely astounding. All right, guys, it's been a fun one. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Sorry I had to subject you to so much crazy Democrat lady talk today, but these people do, have influence in the city where it counts. And so it's important and sometimes a little bit fun to get on here and debunk all the lies that they're putting forward. If you haven't already, share the show, repost the show. That really helps. Make sure you're subscribed, you like, and we'll be back with more shows next week.